welcome to the AgriGold booth. Basically, we've got some AgriGold yield masters here. I'm going to introduce these guys here in a minute, but really what we kind of want to do today is highlight kind of what these guys have done across the country and maybe look into the future here this next growing season, maybe hear some advice that they're going to be giving as they go to the cornfields here this year. So we'll start over here to the left. We've got Mr. Tom Walsh. You can see Tom's report card up here behind me. He's a four-time state NCGA winner. He farms corn and beans. He's all dry land. And his high yield was 307. That's what we hear, right, Tom? 307. So Tom's kind of representing our easternmost corn belt. He's from up there in Hampstead, Maryland, almost over there to the ocean. And he's going to talk to us a lot about the growing conditions over there today. So Tom, welcome to AgriGold Yield Master panel. So the next guy we got here to my immediate left is Mr. Terry Vissing. And Terry comes to us from southern Indiana. And you kind of see his report card. He's been in the NCGA business for a lot of years, multi-state winner. He farms corn and soybeans as well. He's mostly dry land, a little bit of irrigation, and no irrigation. Well, I was told you had a lot of irrigation. All right, no irrigation for Terry. 323 bushel was his high in the NCGA contest. And Terry comes to us from southern Indiana right here on the map. So next guy we got here to my right, we got Brooks Cardinal. Brooks has been in the NCGA business for a few years now, and he's a three-time state NCGA winner, corn, soybeans, wheat, and actually they farm some watermelons also. So you think about Brooks, you know, he's known for intense fertilization, lots of irrigation, and basically he's mastered 334 bushel here in 2018 in the NCGA. So Brooks, welcome. Brooks comes to us right there in the western side, southwest Indiana. They're in Oaktown, Indiana. And then we'll kind of move across over into Illinois. We got a really good representation here. So we've got Dan Luepkes, and Dan's been in the NCGA for a lot of years. So he's really done a lot of things up there in northern Illinois to enhance his yields. He's an 8-time state NCGA winner. He's farming corn and soybeans, mainly dry land. He's been playing around with a lot of different irrigation stuff. I know he's been messing with the drip irrigation, and probably we'll talk about that after a while. But 2017, Dan hit a 327 in the NCGA. So Dan, welcome to the panel. And Dan, you can see on the map here, Dan's clear up there almost to the Wisconsin line. May not seem like it for you, but for us, it's pretty close to Wisconsin. So we'll keep moving here. Then on the other side, we've got Ben Price here. There we go. We got Ben Price, and Ben's going to be kind of our westernmost representative here today. And Ben's kind of new in the NCGA business, and he's been hitting some home runs here. And two-time state NCGA winner, plants corn, soybeans, dry land, some irrigation. 2009? This year you hit your high. Made a drastic increase from 18 to 19 at 323. So congratulations there, Ben. So, folks, we're going to go ahead and get started and dive right on into things. So, I guess as we look across the board, we're going to go ahead and ask these guys some questions. But we've got the question right here behind us, and I think the first one here, 2019 was extremely challenging. And can I see a raise of hands of how many were challenged in 2019? Everybody. It was tough. It was a tough year. So we're going to go through here, and we're going to ask these guys, you know, despite the situation they were in, what are 3 things that really contributed to some really high, consistent corn yields? So Tom, we'll start with you here.
Okay, I contribute most of it to elite hybrids and good soil health.
All right. Terry, let's go to Southern Indiana.
Repeat your question again.
What are 3 things that contributed to your success in 2019?
Okay, in 2019, we had a extremely wet spring, as most of you did. So we went out, took a little bit of a chance and planted corn somewhere around the middle of May, and really worried about it because it turned off cold and wet after. We had some, we are predominantly all no-tills, so therefore we had some slugs and snails actually eating on the roots of the corn. So the challenge of getting that corn up even was a very difficult one this year. Then we moved into a pretty good growing season and was really proud of our corn crop, and we've been doing pretty much of a lot of dry nitrogen, and we got that put on. The corn really took off, and then we ran into an extremely dry, probably 40 days with no rain and extremely hot 90-degree weather. So that was pretty challenging for us, and but it worked out pretty good. All our early corn and soybeans were excellent, and all our late ones were pathetic.
Okay, thanks, Terry. Brooks, you hit some home runs. What was the big contributors for your crop this year?
You know, I like to start with starter. Starter's been huge for us. I mean, it seems like the more we front-loaded the crop, the more response we got in yield on that. You know, and then fungicide's been very important to us. And this year we actually sprayed everything with the ground rig, ran a Haggy through there, and got a lot better coverage. And I think we did gain some yield with that as well. And then we're new to Y drops. We got the 360 Y drops, and I put it on a toolbar, and we side dressed with that, and that was pretty big for us. And I mean, that's something where we're actually on that Haggy, we're going to run Y drops at you know V10 stage or something else, but you know, we're going to actually add another pass of that because just the placement on that was huge, and just was you know, the response we've seen with products we're applying in the tissue test really kind of woke us up. We've been doing fertigation since, you know, we got the irrigations, but you know, it's a guessing game. So we're kind of excited about the Y drops to actually be more precise and efficient on that.
So, Brooks, before we go to Dan, anybody who was through the Central Corn Belt last year, you remember your corn was anywhere from V4 to V6, V7. It was all stages and colors of yellow that you could ever imagine. Anybody see that? Do you have anything like that, Brooks?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So we just happened to get some pictures of this Y drop machine that he made. It's pretty neat. I want to show it up here on the screen. Clicker's not working through the wall. Go forward it. Anyway, Brooks put together this bar this year, set up Y drops. We're going to ask him to talk about that in just a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, that's the same bar we've always used, but we used the mow knives and just had the placement in the centers. And you know, that transformation stage, or just that corn, we just never could keep that corn going. And so we added the Y drops, and it, you know, like I said, with the placement we were getting out of that corn never stopped. And then with all this, with the rain and the yellowing corn, we actually felt like we brought some corn back. You know, where placing it in the middle, I don't think we would have. It takes too long for that to get to the roots when you're applying it in the middle. I still like busting that up. I mean, I don't know, you know, I don't know how we're going to do it for sure. We ain't got it figured out yet on how much we're going to put in the middle, or if we're going to put any, but I still just like busting that up, especially this year with all the rain and as hard as that ground was.
So, Brooks, you want to comment what kind of nutrition you putting in the tank when you're side dressing like that?
You know, a little bit of everything, but you know, nitrogen, sulfur, boron, zinc, and then we're using carbon, we're kind of focusing more on soil health, more now than what we used to, and that's basically what we use.
Okay. All right, Dan, we'll turn it over to you. So we think about your situation there in northern Illinois, up there close to I-80. Seemed like a lot of challenges last year. You want to speak to that?
Well, we were, heck, the last 2 years, if you look at plot data, northern Illinois was one of the worst areas. Last year it was tar spot, and this previous year was just so darn wet. But, he was asking about the things that contribute to the high yields or more consistent yields. I relay off a little bit what Brooks is saying. Starter's very, very important, but it's not just starter. It'd be the relay system that we're using, which is an end furrow and then also a 3x3. And what we're doing is passing off the fertility band, I guess, after the crop uses it in the zone or the furrow. Around V3, V4, we feel we're passing that plant off to our bands on the side of fertility, which has nitrogen and sulfur and sugars and humics and zinc and some boron. So we what they're talking about seeing that yellowing corn effect, I hardly ever get that in any type of weather. When you have enough fertility banded that close, you don't take that corn through that stage. It's green. It stays green, and it gets up and running, and it just keeps on cooking. So I would say those two things are very important in continued things that make a difference for us. And then also the wide drop where we can band several different times through the season if you're really trying to push a crop. That can make quite a difference also. And we do the same thing. We had a lot of the same products in that are on the planter because some of our low CECs will hit it again with, there's nitrogen and sulfur and zinc and boron and some humic sources, different things we add in. So those, for us, that's kind of our game plan. It seems to work year in and year out. It's banded close to the row. And we never let that plant want for anything, I guess you would say. So.
Okay. Dan, coming from northern Illinois, last year you had to wait a long time to plant, just like a lot of us did in Central Corn Belt. Were you one of those guys that planted mid to late June, had to go to an earlier hybrid? How'd that work out? Yeah,
we were. I got all my beans in April, and some guys did get some corn planted in April. I elected not to. I had a few days that I could have. That was a mistake. We made a mistake this year. We went with that. You should always go into a warming trend, but it's not normal. You get held out of the field for a month to 6 weeks, and that's what happened. We would have had better corn if we would have planted in that April window. I mean, the guys that did get planted had better corn. We did get some in May, but like just hours of planting in May. And that is the stuff that we won the NCGA with. It would have been like May 20th. And then most of the rest corn went in June. And we could see, we would get hours on each window, and there might be a week or 2 weeks in between. And they went from like 40 to 80 bushel decreases on those. I mean, it's a big deal. When you, like say, when I'm a little farther north, it makes more of a difference probably than down south. So you gotta weigh that perfect planting conditions with, and that's what I've always preached, and all the high yield guys do, and I agree with it. But there are times, and this year is the exception, we would have done better off running a little earlier and having a little less stand. Actually, we would have done better. So, but every year is different.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Ben, why don't we move over to you? So, tell us what the growing conditions were like out there in northwest Missouri, out there close to Kansas City, and how'd you kind of overcome some of those obstacles?
Well, for us, we were kind of in an unusual little pocket that was able to plant in April. We got pretty much all of our corn planted in mid-April, and we were able to get a nice even stand up out of the ground. we were also able to keep the fields clean before the wet, cold May started, so that was huge for us. Getting chemical down, starting clean, kept the weeds pretty well under check until we could get back in the field in June. You know, we were out of the field for 5 or 6 weeks in May. And then once we were able to get back in, getting top dressed, getting the fungicide on. We've been doing that for several years. We've seen great results from fungicides. And then the September was big for us. We had awesome weather in September. It was warm, it was wet. The grain fill period was just really great for us. We had a lot of weight in that last 3 to 4 weeks to the kernel. So.
Okay. So Ben, the way I understand it, your operation, you're pretty much all about fundamental agronomics. So any of you guys been trying to grow some high yield corn, getting to that 300 mark, that 310, 320, 330, even though it's an acre and a quarter, boy, it's a struggle. It's a real struggle. And, you know, when I hear about what you're doing out there, fundamental agronomics, not a lot, you know, special. Just, I guess, talk about your starter a little bit. And, are you side dressing any? What's your nitrogen source?
Well, we start with anhydrous, and we like to come back, you know, well, once the corn's out of the ground and side dress. That's definitely huge. Starting just with basic soil health, the grid sampling we've got into the last few years with our local co-op, just making sure the nutrients are on every acre to make every acre count. So.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, Ben.
Yeah.
So we're going to go on to the next question here, and Tom, I guess we'll start down here with you. As you look into 2020, you know, what's one new major strategy that you're going to incorporate to try to take things to another level?
I guess I'll take and put more humic on, you know, carbon, and I think that's the glue that hooks everything together for a next level corn production. Just the, you know, it adds oxygen to the ground and to the soil, and stores more nutrients, and it keeps the soil cooler. And with the big combines and the massive root system corn has, I think the soil health is a major place we have to look and address, because that'll take it to new levels. I think so anyway.
Yeah, good comments. So we continue to hear about fulvic acid, humic acid, carbon. Dan, it seems like when we talk to you, it seems like you're a real expert on this. At least I think so. You know, since we're talking about humic acid, why don't you tell us, you know, I'm sure you're using some, what applications, you know, you're finding benefit. What does humic acid do for us?
Well, I'm using a kind of a dark humic out of Canada. It's derived from Leonardite shale, but which most of them are, not all of them, but most of them are. The way I like to look at it is when we're applying like a 32% or something that's got kind of a high salt, I really like to have it hooked up with a carbon source or with a humic. We use a couple different types. We have a humic source, and then we also have another carbon source in molasses, which is that boost product from QLF, but we use both of them. And the way I like to look at it is you've taken organic form and you attach it to this fertilizer, which is kind of abrasive really in a salt form, and it makes it a little more softer to the plant. You can tell it just in, I don't know, you guys that deal with fertilizer on the planter, you know how your hands feel after you're done planting. You've got cuts and all the salts going into them. If you have enough humic in that application, actually even the cuts on your hands don't feel like they do, you know, if you don't have that humic in there. It's just easier on the plant, it's softer on the plant. I think it uptakes better when you have attached that organic compound to the fertilizer. And also it's just good for the ground. The ground accepts it better. The microbes like it. It's natural to them. And I think that's one of the biggest benefits. Is really kind of what it's doing. They call it an inclusion, a certain inclusion rate of it will change the form per se to a more usable form.
Okay, thanks, Dan. Terry, we'll come back over to you. Looking into 2020, what's one big strategy, big picture? What are you going to do different?
Okay, guys, I think we need to get lean and mean and green here when we're doing these this corn crop this coming year. We're going to be looking at lower prices, so we're probably going to be looking at I'm going to a 2x2 this year. It will have humics in it, sugars. We're going to do a tissue testing program weekly. We're going to start at the 350 GDU. And we're going to follow that up. We're going to watch our micronutrient levels. We're going to upload the plant probably more with micronutrients than we ever have. And some other things we're probably looking at is we've probably done, and probably most of you all out there have, we're probably not going to look as much as at the foliar program. More so, we're going to probably go with soil. Want you to think of the soil as being the stomach, and when you put that fertility to that soil into that stomach, the stomach's churning it out and putting it evenly into your plant. And I think when we get to the balance of the plant, we're going to find bigger yields, and we're just going to get there a whole lot cheaper on our ROI and all if we do the banding along the rows and get this in the plant when it really needs it. And I think we're going to trick that plant at certain levels of the plant's life. And like I said, we're going to use just a balanced approach. And probably the tissue testing will lead us to that.
Okay. Thank you, Terry. Brooks?
Yeah, we're kind of the same. Talking the carbons. We're using more and more of that. We're using humic and then sugars, but we're going to get more aggressive with that for sure. And like Terry said, in these prices, I mean, it's just pretty scary. So we're trying to stay efficient, and I'll go back to what I said earlier, the Y drop. We're going to try to do a second pass of Y dropping, and or more. But I just think we can be more efficient doing that, getting that placement perfect, getting that products right there where they need to be, and I think we can cut rates back, too. And that's the main things we're looking at.
Brooks, are you using sugar in your operation right now?
Yeah, we are using sugar. Actually, last year was our first year for sugar, but we use it on. We got in-furrow as well. We're using in-furrow, 2x2, side dressing, and we're even doing some over the top with our fungicides.
So you just going into the kitchen cabinet, grabbing some sugar and dumping it in, or
No.
you want to expand on what you're using? How many pounds?
We're using about a pound in our 2x2 and in-furrow. And really, I guess most applications last year we're using a pound of sugar, and I'm not an expert at that. I'm still learning. Got a lot of questions, but that's just what we did last year.
Okay. Dan, what's going to be big for you in 2020?
Well, I think we're going to kind of continue a lot of things we're doing, but a few things we're going to change is we're going to be looking at a little more KTS I think in a band with a Y drop. We're going to try a little bit more of that. We haven't done much of that in the past, but we've had a hard time holding some potassium levels, so I think that's one of the things we're going to try. I hope it's going to make a difference. I built kind of a dry banding thing last year, which is basically a dry fertilizer planter that we took all the units off of. It's an older planter, and we just have the boxes off with drop tubes, like to use on some no-till and even other till. We did a little of that last year. We had limited success with it because I think we got it on too late. Biology in the ground didn't get it quick enough, but I think it gives us an opportunity to band certain micronutrients, which are cheaper in a dry form, directly on the row. and I think that'll help us. I agree with the foliar stuff. I played with it a lot, have not seen a lot of ROI in it. I'm not saying about that, that's a blanket statement, but overall, we have better luck putting it in the ground. If we're going to spend on fertility, we have better luck putting it in the ground. The soil health, as everybody always is talking about, we keep focusing on that, doing more things. Last 2 years we've started more with chicken litter. We're trucking it in 100 miles, but we've got I wouldn't call it, it's not cheap by any means, but it's in that same price range as dry fertility or a little bit higher, but I think the added benefits will way outweigh, a little extra cost. So we're just a couple years into that. This year, most all the ground got it. So I think for us, that's going to be a game changer after you get several years of applications on it, and we're kind of excited about that. It's not a real easy product to work with, though. Chicken litter, it don't smell good, and your neighbors aren't real happy about it sometimes. So I've got a few phone calls about that. But
Dan, before we go on, so I know your goal is 400 bushel up there in northern Illinois. So can you tell us, I know you've played around with microbials, trying to build that soil microbial population up. How are you doing that? How's it working?
Well, we actually make some of our own. We've got a compost tea maker, which is, it's basically a vermicompost that we run through a boat. There's a vat, or it looks like a hot tub for bugs, but it oxygenates, I'm not saying it right, these microbes, and we feed them, and we make it over a 24-hour period, and then we apply them directly to the soil. I have put them on with a planter also, and the idea of that is if we get more live biology in the soil, that we can release some of this stuff that's stored up. We have a lot of fertility there if we can just get more of it to release. So we're working with that pretty hard. 2 years ago, we've seen really good benefits with it. Last year, again, not so much, but our soils went into an anaerobic state with all the wetness, and then we turned off completely dry, and then we went completely saturated again. So those kind of things didn't work as well, but I believe in them, and I think we're going to continue down that road. The bugs in the jug sometimes are a little hard to get work because of different soils, how they were, and they're just a little erratic in how they work. With this thing we're doing, I think it works a little better on our soil. So.
Okay, thank you, Dan. So Ben, what's big for you for 2020?
I definitely like the concept of the wide drops. I'd like to try that maybe this year. I like the idea of putting the nitrogen right on the root base. But the big thing we've just got started in is the tissue sampling, and I'm looking forward to working with the AgriGold agronomy team on taking samples, weekly. We've spent a lot of time building up the health of our soil, but I'd like to see if there's micronutrients we can add during the growing season to boost that yield even higher. So.
Okay, so probably got 10 minutes left. We got other questions for you guys. If you want to click it, Phil. So we'll just start down here with you, Ben. We didn't really talk about population much right now, but these guys are hitting the 300, 325 mark. So we got a list of things here, but really want to focus on population for a minute. We continue to hear Randy Dowdy, David Hula talk about 10 bushel per thousand. So if they're getting 500 bushel corn, they're planting 50,000. Ben, where are you sitting at on your populations? I know you've got river bottoms, marginal hill ground.
Yeah, we try not to push it too much on our hill ground. Our good river bottom ground doesn't make us as nervous. We've been going up to 34, 35,000 there, which, I know there's a lot of guys going a lot higher, but our hill ground, it just kind of depends what kind of topsoil we got. Sometimes we tend to get really hot and dry in July. We can get more Kansas weather than Corn Belt weather. we're starting to push populations a little higher, but we're still in that 30 to 35,000 range.
So what you're saying, it doesn't take a big-time population to get 320 bushel corn?
Not for us. For us, it's doing the little things. The
Okay.
the soil health, fungicides, keeping the fields clean. All those things just kind of add up for us. So.
Okay. Dan, Northern Illinois, when we think about Northern Illinois, a lot of us think about flat, black, high population. If you're getting ready to get to that 400 bushel one of these days, tell us about your populations.
Well, we're definitely not flat and black. We've got some sands and some hills, and we've got some really marginal ground. But on our marginal ground is where we can really see the benefits of varied population. We'll go all the way down to like 18, 20,000 on the poor ground, and then it will still ear. If we go higher than that, it might not even ear on some real marginal stuff. And then on the higher end, if it's just a common field, we'll probably be in that 34, 35. Now, I have pushed last 4 years, we've, did some 38s, 40s, 42s, 44s, 45s, and we can't get any more yield out of it where we're at. We're putting enough food there, but we can't get enough sunlight down into the canopy because we start choking our sunlight out. Where Northern Illinois is, we just length of day, or when we're actually filling, let's say in September, October, the days are already starting to shorten. So for me to get to a higher level, I believe I got to go, and we're starting to do it, actually back populations down to get more sunlight, because my other factors, my limiting factors aren't the fertility, and it isn't water, it's photosynthesis. So, with the right year, I can do it, but we got to have sunlight. And I've got a couple things I'm working on to help with that. I really like to see the companies move into shorter corns where you can drive sunlight deeper into the canopy, because we have such good vegetation now with good fertility that, Ken Ferry says you don't want any sunlight hitting the ground. I can't hardly get sunlight to hit halfway down the plant. I can't get it to the ear leaf. So that's my issue. If I back my populations down, or if I went to a little narrower rows, which we might do someday, would help. But that's my idea on that. So.
Okay. Brooks, tell us about your populations.
Yeah, I agree a lot with Dan. We're kind of the same way. We kind of got a little carried away with populations, and it took us backwards a lot. It's just that many more plants to feed, and it's just really hard to manage and expensive. And if we did get any yield out of it, it didn't even justify the extra seed cost. But we go all the way up to 38,000. We've got one hybrid that it seems like 38,000 is its sweet spot under irrigation, and then our marginal ground. We're about 28,000. I think is the lowest we go, and I think, like Dan's thought, I think I probably need to drop that even more, and I could see a benefit out of that. So we'll probably try some of that, but that's where we've been.
Okay. So kind of got one more question for these guys, or comments. I want to talk about fungicide for a minute. AgriGold Agronomy team, we've got our opinions. The time we like to see fungicide applications, the number one benefit would be that VT time frame, whether it's right before or right after. The big question is, which one is next? Is the next benefit going to be halfway through grain fill, or are we getting a bigger bang than what we think at, let's say, a V5, V6 application? So, Tom, you playing around with fungicides, and you want to comment on that?
Yeah, when I respray my corn, I usually put like a little bit of core on and fungicide like a half rate, and when it's only V5 or 6 when it's pretty young, and then I come over it again when it's VT, right when the tassel, the bottom branch, and it's pollinating right there when it's real young. I think that's when it stimulates something, because it just makes bigger kernels, and I sprayed a lot of it like that, and it pretty well.
Terry, any comments?
On fungicides?
Yeah.
We've approached fungicides in several different ways and really still probably don't know the exact timing, but I'm like Mike, probably the VT time is the best. There's a new product on the market this year, probably some of you know, that they're saying maybe even could go down to V10, and it will last on up through VT, especially for you guys that don't have the high clearance sprayers, or maybe not the Haggies, but the John Deeres, the Cases, and different things. So we're excited about that, maybe starting a little early. But folks, you need to know your varieties. The varieties make a whole big difference in how you use your fungicides. So we've got one variety that probably needs a V5. A lot of people don't realize it, but when gray leaf spot's probably one of our biggest problems. And when you got that vein of that leaf on that corn, and gray leaf spot attacks that spot that you see in that corn plant or that corn leaf, it's dead from there on out. So the rest of the season, you've limited your photosynthesis into that corn plant. So watch these varieties. The no-till situation that we're in is probably creates a little bit more problems for us, but we've come a long way with fungicides. And wanted to talk one thing just a little bit. Really believe let's go back just a little bit. Your soil health may be the very, very most important thing about growing corn. What your carbon load is in your soil is really going to make a difference. But this soil health thing is huge, and we've got a little different approach on our soil health. We're feeding it through cover crops, and then we're using some sugars, and we're trying to excite those microbes to produce extra bushels of corn for us, and we feel that's probably the key to our yields. We are using a couple tons of turkey litter, and we're getting earthworm activities, and we're just seeing a lot of benefits.
Okay, thanks, Terry. Brooks, why don't you tell us about your fungicide program?
Yeah, I mean, it starts with scouting. I mean, we've done all different trials in all different ways, but you got to get out in that field and see where you're at. And we've done all the way up to 3 passes of fungicides. Late season is very important. We get a lot of yield gain out of the late season applications, but so yeah, I mean, we did 2 applications last year across the whole farm, and I expect us to do the same. So I mean, I don't know if we can do a V10 or something around then, and then come back a couple weeks after brown silk probably. If we can wait that long, just see where we're at. But
when you say 2 applications, you're talking a V6 and VT?
No, V10's the first one, and then 2 weeks after brown silk, we'll come back for the second application.
All right. Dan, you got any comments on that?
Well, I kind of agree with what Brooks said. I think what seems like if you're going to go with a Cadillac package, I think that, V10, V12, and that'll hold that to after brown silk. The problem with like one VT is you are going to run out. Most fungicides won't last long enough. So we usually wait, and even if I only do one, I usually wait till brown silk, because we might have a fertility aspect in with that pass or something else in there, and I don't want to mess with the plant while it's pollinating because of the fertility, not because of the fungicide. But we've noticed our, just timing with insects and everything going a little bit later, and we can push that life of that plant a little later into the season if we apply later. And like, we've got that darn tar spot now, it's in the soil. We got it again this year, but it came in late enough that it wasn't yield inhibiting. The year before, I mean, it killed all our corn in August. It was devastating. So now we have to watch that all the time. So that we have to be ready to go in with a second or third pass. I mean, we don't want to, but we got to be ready for it, which goes back to what Brooks says as far as scouting. I mean, you got to watch them fields if you've got something like that there.
Okay. Ben, finish up with you. Tell us about your fungicide program, if you have one.
Yeah, we've just been doing one application right at brown silk. That's what we've been doing. We've seen a lot of positive results as far as stopping any kind of disease, keeping those top leaves green and healthy throughout the end of the grain field period. also just keeping the plant healthy. We've had times where it's got so dry that it's helped the plant stay healthy and green till you can get that next rain, you know. We've gone through periods of drought, and it's really helped us in those situations, as well as a wet year where you've got a lot of disease pressure and stuff like that. So.
Okay. All right, guys, I want to thank you for coming up here today and being with us. With that, let's give these guys a hand.